They thought they were messing with an easy mark, a quiet old man on a crowded bus. What they didn't realize was that he was a battle-hardened Vietnam veteran, someone with lessons they'd soon regret provoking. It was just another muggy afternoon on the 5:15 bus bound for downtown Baltimore. The air inside was heavy with the chatter of weary commuters, their soft voices mingling with the periodic squeal of the brakes. Near the front, an elderly black man settled into his seat, his rough, weathered hands resting on a cane that looked as aged as its owner. His clothes were modest, a simple jacket and neatly pressed slacks, projecting dignity without pretense. At first, he blended seamlessly into the mundane rhythm of the bus, just another passenger easily overlooked. Yet, there was a quiet intensity in the way he sat, upright and composed, as if the burdens of the world had long ago failed to weigh him down. His steady gaze suggested resilience, though a faint crease on his brow hinted at a life that had weathered many storms. 3 rows back, a group of teenagers clambered aboard, their boisterous laughter slicing through the otherwise subdued atmosphere. They carried themselves with the unearned confidence of youth, scanning the bus for entertainment. One of them, a lanky boy in a bright red hoodie, spotted the old man. His eyes lit up with mischief, not respect, as he nudged his friends and whispered something that provoked snickers. The old man sat motionless, gazing out the window as the streets blurred past. If he noticed their glances or heard their snide remarks, he gave no indication. The boys, unsatisfied by his indifference, decided to escalate. "Hey, old man," the boy in the red hoodie called out, his voice cutting through the soft hum of the bus. "You lose your walker or something? Bet you're just waiting for someone to carry you home, huh?" A ripple of unease passed through the bus. A few passengers glanced nervously at the boys, others at the old man. Most, however, kept their heads down, pretending not to hear. The old man shifted slightly but remained silent, his focus fixed on the world outside the window. Encouraged by the lack of reaction, Red Hoodie smirked and stood, swaying as the bus hit a bump. "What's wrong, Grandpa? Cat got your tongue?" The man's grip on his cane tightened slightly, almost imperceptibly, but his face remained calm. Slowly, he turned his head, meeting the boy's gaze with a quiet, unflinching stare. Something changed in that instant. There was no anger or fear in his expression, just an unwavering strength that seemed to command the space around him. The boy hesitated, faltering for a moment, but pride wouldn't let him back down. The laughter from his friends only grew louder, filling the bus like a challenge. Red Hoodie leaned closer, emboldened. "What's the matter, old man? Too good to talk to us?" Another boy, heavier and wearing a backward cap, chimed in. "Yeah, probably can't even hear us. You need a hearing aid too, Grandpa." The man remained still, his cane planted firmly between his knees. His face betrayed no hint of emotion, yet his hands, roughened by decades of labor and hardship, tightened ever so slightly on the wood. Across the aisle, a young woman shifted uncomfortably, glancing between her phone and the teenagers. A man in a gray suit buried his face deeper into his newspaper, visibly uneasy but unwilling to intervene. The taunts escalated, the boys feeding off each other's bravado. "What are you, some kind of king?" Red Hoodie sneered. "Gonna knight us with that cane, Grandpa?" The bus lurched to a stop at a red light, the abrupt motion momentarily silencing the raucous laughter. The old man finally spoke, his voice steady and firm, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Respect," he said, his tone deliberate, "is a lesson some people only learn the hard way." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of someone who had earned the right to say them. They hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. For a moment, the teenagers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. But Red Hoodie recovered quickly, masking his discomfort with a veneer of bravado. "Oh, so he talks now," he sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Respect, huh? That's rich coming from someone too scared to stand up for himself." The old man turned his head slightly, his gaze locking with the boys. You think strength is loud, don't you? You have no idea what real strength looks like. The bus fell into a tense silence, every passenger now drawn into the unfolding confrontation. Even the boys' friends shifted nervously, their laughter dissolving into awkward grins. The light turned green, and the bus jerked forward, its passengers swaying with the motion. Red Hoodie took a step closer, leaning over the old man with exaggerated intimidation. "Why don't you show us, then? Let's see how strong you are." The old man sighed, a long, steady exhale that seemed to carry decades of unspoken experience. His eyes flickered toward the boy, calm and unshakable. It wasn't just the boy who was about to get a lesson. Everyone on that bus was about to witness something they wouldn't soon forget. For a moment, the bus seemed smaller, the atmosphere thick with tension. The elderly man remained perfectly still, his cane steady between his hands. His gaze didn't waver, but his thoughts drifted unbidden to another time, 40 years earlier, in the swamps of Vietnam. Knee-deep in humid marshes, surrounded by the deafening roar of helicopters and bursts of gunfire, survival had been instinct, not choice. Back then, he had been barely more than a boy himself, younger than the kids taunting him now. War had aged him quickly. He could still see the faces of his brothers in arms, some lost, some etched into his memory forever. Their laughter during quiet nights in camp, their stories of home, they had stayed with him long after the battlefield had gone silent. The bus jolted over a pothole, snapping him back to the present. He straightened slightly, his grip on the cane firm but measured. Anger didn't come easily to him anymore. What he felt was deeper, more deliberate, a sense of duty to impart a lesson these boys clearly hadn't learned yet. Red Hoodie's mocking laugh interrupted his thoughts. "What's the matter, Grandpa? Cat got your tongue again?" The man didn't respond immediately. His eyes swept over the boy, taking in the bravado, the posture, the hollow confidence of someone who had never faced real trials. He'd seen it before, in young soldiers who thought they were invincible, until the battlefield taught them otherwise. Across the aisle, an older woman whispered nervously to the man beside her, glancing toward the scene. No one spoke up. The silence wasn't quite fear, it was more a collective decision to stay uninvolved. Finally, the old man broke the silence, his voice steady and deliberate. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said, his tone carrying an edge that stilled the boy's smirk. "Oh yeah?" Red Hoodie shot back, feigning indifference. "Who's that, your old war buddy?" The man leaned back slightly, his expression unchanging. "No. A young soldier who thought he was untouchable. He learned otherwise." The boy snorted, but his friends remained quiet, their smirks faltering. "Whatever, man. You're just an old has-been. Nobody cares about your stories." The faintest trace of a knowing smile touched the old man's lips, not amused, but resolute. "Careful, son. Sometimes stories are all that keep you from making the same mistakes." The words landed heavily, and for a moment, even the bus seemed to move more quietly. Red Hoodie, unwilling to admit defeat, stepped closer, now just inches away from the old man. "You think you're so wise, huh? Why don't you prove it?" The old man's eyes narrowed slightly, his calm unwavering, but beneath it lay a resolve honed over a lifetime. Not out of anger, but with measured intent, the old man adjusted his cane. His movements were deliberate, slow, the actions of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The storm within him wasn't born of fury, it was tempered by a lifetime of experience, and it was about to show these boys the true meaning of strength. The bus rattled on, its passengers frozen in the thick tension that filled the air. Slowly, the old man rose from his seat, his cane steadying his weight as he stood. He wasn't a large man, time had pared down his once strong frame, but there was a presence about him, a quiet authority that made him seem taller, more imposing. The boys stared, their smirks faltering, curiosity beginning to edge out their bravado. "You want me to prove something?" the man asked, his voice calm and quiet, yet commanding attention. His eyes locked onto Red Hoodie, steady and unwavering. Let's talk about proof. Red Hoodie let out a nervous chuckle, taking half a step back. What, you gonna hit me with that cane, old man? The man's hand brushed the cane's handle, but he didn't raise it. No, he replied simply. But I will teach you something, because it's clear your mouth hasn't learned restraint. The air grew heavy, electric, the kind of charged energy that made every hair stand on end. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, eyes wide, unwilling to miss a single word. Do you think this is strength? The man continued, gesturing at the group. Posturing. Loud words. Trying to embarrass someone in public. That's not strength, it's fear. Fear that the world might see you for who you really are. The other boys shifted uncomfortably, their confidence visibly waning. One muttered, "Come on, man, let's just sit down," but Red Hoodie wasn't ready to let it go. His pride was at stake, and he couldn't retreat in front of his friends. "You don't know anything about me, old man," he shot back, though his voice had lost some of its edge. "I know more than you think," the man replied, his tone steady, deliberate. "You see this cane?" He lifted it slightly. "It's not just a stick, it's a reminder. Every scar, every ache in these old bones comes with a story. Stories of battles fought, not with fists, but with courage, discipline, and honor. Things you wouldn't understand, because you've never had to earn them." Red Hoodie's bravado faltered. His hands clenched into fists, but he didn't move. The old man leaned in slightly, his piercing gaze fixed on the boy. "Do you know what it's like to watch your friends die so you can live?" he asked, his voice low but unyielding. "To carry their memory with you every single day, knowing you owe them more than you can ever repay?" The words landed harder than any blow. The boy blinked, his jaw working as though he wanted to respond, but no words came. The bus was silent except for the low hum of the engine, every passenger captivated by the unfolding scene. "You're lucky, kid," the man continued, his tone softening slightly. "You don't have to learn these lessons the hard way. But keep going like this, disrespecting people, thinking the world owes you something, and you'll find out soon enough. And when that day comes, you'll wish you'd listened." Red Hoodie's face turned crimson, but not from anger, this was shame. He looked away, his shoulders sagging. His friends sat down quietly, their earlier confidence gone, replaced with visible discomfort. The old man straightened, his grip on the cane firm but relaxed. "Now," he said, his voice firm, "take your seat, or get off this bus." Red Hoodie hesitated for a moment before muttering something under his breath and retreating to his seat. His friends followed, heads bowed, their bravado shattered. The confrontation was over, but the lesson lingered, heavy and undeniable. As the teenagers sank into their seats, the tension in the bus began to dissipate. Passengers exchanged quiet glances, some filled with approval, others tinged with disbelief. The old man remained standing for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the bus, lingering briefly on each face, before he returned to his seat. A middle-aged woman near the front broke the silence, her voice hesitant but respectful. "Sir," she said, "that was brave." The man turned slightly, offering her a small nod. "It wasn't bravery," he replied. "Just doing what needed to be done." Behind him, Red Hoodie and his friends sat in silence. The boy stared out the window, arms crossed tightly over his chest, his pride visibly wounded. His friends whispered among themselves in hushed tones, their earlier laughter a distant memory. The bus rolled on, its engine humming softly. Near the back, a young man wearing headphones around his neck spoke up, his tone curious but tentative. "Vietnam, right?" The old man turned slightly, his expression unreadable. "Yes," the old man replied simply. "My grandfather served there," the young man continued, his voice quieter now. He didn't talk about it much, but when he did, his words trailed off as his gaze dropped to his hands. "Thank you, for what you did, for what you gave." The old man's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. We all gave something, he said softly. Some of us more than others. His words lingered, heavy with unspoken meaning. A few passengers nodded quietly, the weight of his statement settling over them. The atmosphere on the bus had shifted completely, from tension to reflection, a shared understanding of the gravity of the moment. One of the boys, the stocky one in the backward cap, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Sir," he began, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry. We shouldn't have said those things." The old man turned to him, his expression softening. "Apology accepted," he said. "But remember, respect isn't something you give just because it's demanded. It's something you give because it's the right thing to do." The boy nodded quickly, his face reddening with embarrassment. Red Hoodie didn't say anything but shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his pride clearly at odds with the guilt creeping in. As the bus slowed for the next stop, the old man glanced out the window at a familiar street corner. He tapped his cane lightly on the floor before rising to his feet. Just before stepping off, he turned back to the bus, his voice calm but resolute, carrying over the quiet hum of the engine. "Kindness and respect cost you nothing," he said, addressing no one in particular but speaking to everyone. "But withholding them can cost you everything." The door hissed open, and the old man stepped off, his steady gait a testament to the strength he carried within. Though he was gone, his presence lingered, leaving an indelible mark on those who had witnessed the moment. The bus remained silent as it pulled away from the curb, the passengers deep in thought. They had seen more than a confrontation, they had seen a lesson in dignity and humility. For many, the old man's words echoed louder than any sound they'd heard all day. Red Hoodie sat slouched in his seat, his bravado now fully deflated. His friends avoided looking at one another, their expressions a mix of guilt and shame. Across the aisle, the young woman who had earlier stayed silent gazed out the window, her faint reflection staring back at her. She wondered why she hadn't done more, why she had chosen to remain a bystander. At the front of the bus, the middle-aged woman who had spoken earlier absently brushed her fingers over her phone's screen, lost in thought. The young man in the back, who had mentioned his grandfather, leaned his head back against the seat, his eyes closed as memories of his family and their sacrifices swirled in his mind. For everyone on that bus, it was more than a moment for the teenagers, it was a moment of clarity for all. The lesson wasn't just about respecting elders, it was about recognizing the weight of each person's journey, the battles they fought, and the quiet strength required to move through life with grace and dignity. As the bus reached its final stop, passengers began filing out, each carrying the moment with them in their own way. The teenagers exited together but walked apart, their usual carefree energy replaced by quiet introspection. Red Hoodie paused at the corner, glancing back at the bus one last time before shoving his hands into his pockets and walking away. For those who remained, the silence spoke louder than words. They had witnessed a simple truth, delivered with quiet conviction: respect isn't earned through fear or bravado but through understanding and compassion. To anyone hearing this story, take a moment to ask yourself, what unseen battles have the people around you faced? How could a small act of kindness or respect change their day, or even their life? Remember, every person carries a story you may never know. Treat them with the dignity they deserve.